Hello. It is hard to describe the exact moment when everything in your life begins to unravel, but for me, it happened at my own birthday party. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a night where I could enjoy the company of my closest friends and family. Instead, it became the most humiliating evening of my life. I never imagined I would spend my birthday watching my wife, Sarah, flirt with a much younger man. The evening started normally enough. People arrived at our house, drinks were poured, and laughter filled the air. My back had been giving me trouble for months, so I stayed mostly seated, trying to manage the pain while keeping up appearances. It was my birthday, after all. I did not want to ruin the mood by complaining. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed to be having the time of her life. She was always the more social one between us, and tonight was no exception. I watched her flit between guests, laughing, smiling, and engaging in conversations while I remained in the background, trying to keep a smile plastered on my face. It was when the music started that things began to shift. I noticed Sarah dancing with a man I did not recognize, a young guy, probably in his 20s, someone who seemed far too comfortable with her. At first, I brushed it off. She was just having fun, I told myself. It is a party, she is allowed to enjoy herself. But as the evening wore on, my discomfort grew. He was from the company next door, I later found out. Some guy she had met at work events, someone I had never even heard of. It was not like I was paranoid. Sarah was not the type to act out of line, at least not as far as I knew. But watching them dance together, their movements so fluid, their smiles so bright, it felt like I was watching something I was not supposed to see. At first, I tried to laugh it off. I even joked with a couple of friends about how Sarah was out dancing, all of us. But inside, I felt that familiar knot of jealousy tightening in my chest. I could not ignore the way he held her a little too close, or how her laugh seemed a little too genuine. I kept hoping she would eventually make her way over to me, maybe ask me to dance despite my back, or at least acknowledge me in some way. It was my birthday, after all, but she stayed with him. And then it happened. Right in the middle of the celebration, right in front of everyone, Sarah leaned in and kissed him. Not just a quick peck, not just a friendly kiss. This was a real, passionate kiss, the kind that leaves no room for doubt. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. My wife, the woman I had been married to for years, was kissing another man at my birthday party. I looked around the room, hoping somehow I had imagined it. But no, everyone saw it. Her colleagues, my friends, everyone. I could see the shock on their faces, the awkward way people turned away, trying to pretend they had not witnessed the betrayal unfolding in front of them. But I saw everything. It felt like time had slowed down, like the world around me had dimmed, leaving me alone in that moment of pure humiliation. I could feel the heat rising in my face, a mixture of shame and anger bubbling up inside me, but I was frozen. My body would not move. My mind would not process what was happening. How could she do this? How could she kiss someone else here, in front of everyone we knew? Finally, the embarrassment and fury overtook me. I stood up, grabbed my cane. My back had been killing me all night, and headed for the door. I could not stay there any longer. The thought of confronting her, of standing in that room while people whispered and gossiped behind my back, was unbearable. I had to leave. My mind was spinning as I walked out of the house. I reached into Sarah's purse, which she had left by the door, and pulled out the car keys. I needed to get away, to clear my head, to figure out what the hell had just happened. As I made my way to the car, I could barely feel the cold night air against my skin. My thoughts were a storm, swirling with disbelief, anger, and the crushing realization that my marriage was falling apart right in front of me. This was not just a mistake. It was a betrayal, one that I did not see coming, and one that I had no idea how to recover from. I got into the car, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. For a moment, I just sat there, staring straight ahead, trying to calm the chaos in my mind. My back throbbed from the tension, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. The pain of knowing that the woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with, had chosen someone else over me. I heard the door open behind me and turned to see Sarah running toward the car, her face flushed with panic. The guy she had kissed was standing in the doorway, watching the scene unfold like he was part of some twisted drama. I wanted to drive away, to leave them both behind, but I could not move. I was stuck, frozen by the weight of everything that had just happened. "Mark," she shouted as she approached the car. "Please wait. Let me explain." I rolled down the window just enough to speak. "Explain what, Sarah? You kissed him." Everyone saw it. Her face crumpled, and I could see the guilt washing over her. "It was nothing," she pleaded. "It was just a stupid mistake. I had too much to drink. It did not mean anything." I shook my head, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. It meant something to me. Sarah stood there, her eyes wide and desperate, but her words did not reach me. How could she stand there and say it was nothing when I had just witnessed her kissing another man in front of all our friends? My heart was pounding in my chest, and all I wanted was to get as far away from this nightmare as possible. "Mark, please," she said, her voice breaking. "I messed up. I know I did, but you have to understand. It's not what it looked like. It was stupid. I wasn't thinking clearly." "Not thinking clearly?" I shot back, my anger finally bubbling to the surface. "Sarah, you kissed him. You were dancing with him all night like I wasn't even there. And then you kissed him in front of everyone. How can you stand there and say it didn't mean anything?" She took a step closer to the car, her hands shaking as she tried to reach for me. "It was just a moment of weakness, Mark. I swear. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was just, I don't know. I guess I was feeling lost, and he was there, and it just happened. But it doesn't change how I feel about you. You're my husband. I love you." I looked at her, trying to process her words, but they felt hollow. How could she talk about love after what I had just seen? The image of her kissing that guy, laughing with him, moving with him on the dance floor. It was burned into my mind, and no amount of apologizing could erase that. "Love?" I said bitterly. "Is that what this is? Because it sure as hell didn't feel like love when you were wrapped around him, kissing him like I didn't even exist." Her face crumpled, and tears started to fall down her cheeks. "I know," she whispered. "I know I hurt you, Mark, but I swear, it was a mistake. Please, just come back inside. We can talk about this. We can figure it out." I shook my head, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were turning white. "I can't, Sarah. I can't just pretend this didn't happen. I can't walk back in there and face everyone after what you did. Please," she begged. "We can fix this. I don't want to lose you." Her words were desperate, but they felt like too little, too late. The damage was done. I stared at her for a moment longer, then finally rolled the window up, cutting off her pleas. I put the car in gear and pulled out of the driveway, leaving her standing there in the cold, watching as I drove away. As I drove through the dark, empty streets, my mind raced. I had no idea where I was going. I just needed to get away. Away from her. Away from the party. Away from the crushing realization that my marriage had just shattered in front of me. I kept replaying the night in my head, over and over again. The way she had danced with him, the way she had kissed him, the way she had looked at him. So carefree, so happy. How long had this been going on? Was this just one mistake, or had there been more that I had not seen? The questions swirled in my mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. I ended up at a park, one we used to take the kids to when they were younger. The playground was empty now, the swings swaying gently in the wind. I parked the car and just sat there, staring out at the dark silhouettes of the trees. My back ached, but I barely noticed the physical pain anymore. The emotional weight was so much heavier. For a long time, I just sat there in the car, trying to figure out what to do next. Part of me wanted to go home, to confront her properly, to make her explain herself. But another part of me, the part that was still in shock, could not bear the thought of seeing her right now. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and saw the missed calls and texts from Sarah. She had been trying to reach me ever since I left, but I could not bring myself to open them. I was not ready to hear her excuses, not ready to deal with the fallout of what she had done. I put the phone down and leaned my head back against the seat, closing my eyes. How had we gotten here? Just a year ago, I would have said that we had a good marriage. Sure, we had our problems. Everyone does. But I never imagined something like this could happen. I never thought Sarah would be the one to betray me like this. But maybe I had been blind. Maybe I had been so caught up in my own life, my own struggles, that I had missed the signs that something was wrong. My back problems had taken over my life in the past year, and I knew I had not been the easiest person to live with. I had been distant, moody, and consumed by my own pain. Maybe that had pushed her away. Maybe she had been looking for something I could not give her anymore. But even if that were true, it did not excuse what she did. Nothing could excuse that. I sat in the car for what felt like hours, trying to process everything. My thoughts kept circling back to one question. Could I forgive her? Could I ever trust her again after what I had seen? Eventually, I realized I did not have the answers. Not yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I could not go back to her. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I started the car again and drove home, but when I pulled into the driveway, I did not go inside. Instead, I grabbed a few things from the trunk, clothes, my phone charger, anything I thought I might need for a few days, and drove to a nearby motel. I needed space. I needed time to think, to figure out what came next. The motel room was as bare and impersonal as I expected. A standard, beige room with a small bed, a cheap dresser, and a bathroom with questionable lighting. But at that moment, it was exactly what I needed. Somewhere quiet, somewhere I could be alone with my thoughts. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat down on the edge of the bed, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I had never imagined I would be spending the night of my birthday in a cheap motel, trying to wrap my head around the fact that my wife had kissed another man. My mind kept replaying the moment over and over, like a broken record. The image of Sarah, laughing and carefree with that guy, then leaning in to kiss him, burned into my memory. I wanted to believe her when she said it was a mistake. I wanted to believe that it was just a stupid, impulsive decision fueled by alcohol and the moment. But the truth was, I did not believe it. Not really. Maybe it was the betrayal itself, or maybe it was the way she had been drifting away from me for the past year. I could not tell where it had all gone wrong, but I knew it had been building long before that kiss. I lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. My phone was buzzing on the nightstand. Another call from Sarah. I turned it over, silencing it. I was not ready to talk to her. Not now, maybe not ever. I needed time to figure out what I was going to do next. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that our marriage had been crumbling for a long time. The signs had been there, but I had ignored them. I thought it was just the stress of life, my back issues, or the normal wear and tear that any marriage goes through after years together. But now, it was clear that Sarah had been slipping away from me, and I had been too wrapped up in my own problems to notice. I remembered the times she had gone out more often, spending late nights with friends from work. She had started working out more, going to yoga classes, and focusing on her appearance in ways she had not done in years. At the time, I thought it was just her way of coping with the stresses of life. But now I wondered, had she been looking for something, or someone, to fill the gaps I could no longer fill? I hated the thought of it, but it was impossible to ignore. I had been distant, too. My back pain had taken over so much of my life that I had shut her out emotionally. I was not the man she had married, and deep down, I knew that. But did that justify what she had done? Could I really put all the blame on myself? No, I could not. Sarah had made a choice. A deliberate choice to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. No matter how much we had drifted apart, no matter how distant we had become, that kiss was a betrayal. And the worst part was, I did not know if I could ever forgive her for it. The next morning, I woke up early, still groggy from a night of restless sleep. My back was aching, as usual, but the emotional weight was even heavier. I had been tossing and turning all night, my mind racing with questions and doubts. What was I going to do? Could I really go back to her after what had happened? I pulled out my phone and saw the string of missed calls and messages from Sarah. She had not stopped trying to reach me, and I knew I would have to face her eventually. But not yet. I needed more time. I got dressed and left the motel, driving aimlessly around town, trying to clear my head. I ended up at a coffee shop, one of those small, quiet places where nobody would bother me. I sat at a corner table, nursing a cup of black coffee, and stared out the window. It was strange to think about how much my life had changed in the span of one night. Just 24 hours ago, I had been looking forward to my birthday party, thinking everything was fine. Now, I was sitting in a coffee shop, wondering if my marriage was over. I tried to imagine a future without Sarah. It was hard to picture. We had been together for so long, built a life together, raised our kids together. The idea of not having her in my life felt like a punch to the gut. But at the same time, the idea of staying with her, of pretending like everything could go back to the way it was, felt impossible. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone again. This time, I opened one of her texts. Sarah, Mark, I'm so sorry. Please come home. I love you. We can work this out. I stared at the message for a long time, trying to decide how to respond. Did I love her? Yes. But did I want to work this out? I was not sure anymore. How could I work through something like this? How could I ever trust her again? Before I could overthink it, I typed out a short reply. Me, I need some time. I'll come by the house later to talk. I put the phone down, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. The truth was, I did not know what I was going to say to her. Part of me wanted to scream, to ask her how she could do this to me, to us. But another part of me was just tired. Tired of the pain, tired of the questions, tired of everything. By the time I left the coffee shop, I had made a decision. I needed to see her. I needed to face her, to have a real conversation about what had happened. But I also knew that this might be the beginning of the end. I was not sure if our marriage could survive this, and deep down, I was starting to think that maybe it should not. When I pulled into the driveway of our house, my stomach twisted into knots. The house that had once felt like home now felt foreign, like I was about to step into a place I no longer belonged. I took a deep breath and got out of the car, my legs feeling shaky as I approached the front door. Sarah opened the door before I could even knock, her face pale and drawn. She looked like she had been crying all night, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then the memory of that kiss flashed in my mind, and the anger returned. Mark, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for coming. I nodded but did not say anything. I walked past her and into the living room, the tension between us thick and suffocating. I could feel her eyes on me, waiting for me to speak, but I did not know where to start. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I turned to face her. We need to talk, I said, my voice cold and steady. Sarah nodded slowly, her hands trembling as she clasped them in front of her. I could see the fear in her eyes, the desperation, but I was too numb to care. I was not here to comfort her, to make her feel better. I was here for answers. I don't even know where to begin, I said, sinking into one of the chairs in the living room. My back ached, but that pain was secondary now to everything else I was feeling. You kissed him, Sarah, in front of everyone. How am I supposed to move past that? She sat down across from me, her eyes red from crying, her expression filled with regret. Mark, I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you, and I hate myself for it. But it didn't mean anything. It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. You keep saying it didn't mean anything, I said, my voice rising. But it meant something to me. It meant everything to me. You kissed him at my birthday party, in front of all our friends. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? Tears spilled down her cheeks as she looked at me, her face filled with guilt. I know, Mark. I know I messed up. I don't have an excuse. I was drunk, and I was feeling, I don't know, lost. But I swear, it didn't mean anything. You were feeling lost? I repeated, disbelief flooding through me. So that's your explanation? You felt lost, so you kissed someone else? She wiped at her tears, struggling to find the right words. It wasn't about him, Mark. It was never about him. It was about me. I've been feeling so disconnected from everything lately, from you, from our life. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't even recognize myself sometimes. I stared at her, the anger still boiling beneath the surface. But now there was something else, confusion. She had never said anything like this before. We had our problems, sure, but I had no idea she was feeling this lost. How had I missed it? Had I been so wrapped up in my own issues that I hadn't seen what was happening to her? I've been trying to hold it together for so long, she continued, her voice cracking. But I've felt so alone, even when we're together. And I know it's partly my fault. I should have talked to you about it. I should have been honest about how I was feeling, but instead, I let it build up, and then last night, I just broke. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to make sense of everything she was saying. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to understand what had led to that kiss. But another part of me, an angrier, more wounded part, could not let it go. Sarah, I said, my voice low, we've all been dealing with things. You think I don't feel lost sometimes? You think I haven't struggled with everything that's been happening in my life? But I didn't kiss someone else. I didn't betray you. She flinched at the word betray, and I could see the shame wash over her face. I know I betrayed you, and I'm so sorry. I would take it back if I could, but I can't. All I can do now is ask for your forgiveness. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Forgiveness? You think I can just forgive you for something like this? Do you even understand what you did? You didn't just kiss him, Sarah. You shattered everything we had. You broke the trust between us. How am I supposed to get that back? She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. I don't know, she cried. I don't know how to fix this, but I love you, Mark. I love you so much, and I don't want to lose you. Please, just tell me what I need to do. I'll do anything. For a long time, I just sat there, watching her cry, feeling a strange mix of sadness and anger. I wanted to believe that we could fix this, that somehow we could find our way back to each other. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't know if I wanted to. Do you love me? I asked, my voice quieter now. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. Yes, she whispered. Of course I do. I love you more than anything. Then why did you do it? I asked, my voice shaking. Why did you kiss him if you love me so much? She wiped her face, sniffling as she tried to speak. I don't know. I wish I had an answer. I was confused. I've been feeling so disconnected from everything, and he was just there. It was stupid, and I regret it more than anything in the world. I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. I paced across the room, my back aching but my mind too overwhelmed to care. Sarah, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can get past this. I don't know if I want to. Her eyes widened in fear, and she stood up too, reaching for me. Mark, please don't say that. Please don't give up on us. We've been through so much together. We can get through this. We just need to talk, to work through it. I'm not sure there's anything left to work through, I said, my voice cold. You broke something between us, and I don't know if I can forgive you for that. She collapsed back onto the couch, sobbing again. Please, she whispered through her tears. Please don't leave me. I felt a lump in my throat as I watched her cry, but I forced myself to stay strong. I couldn't let her emotions sway me right now. I needed to think clearly. I needed to decide what was best for me. I need time, I said finally, my voice flat. I need to figure out what I want. I can't do this right now. Without waiting for her response, I grabbed my keys and walked out of the house, the door closing softly behind me. The cold air hit my face as I stepped outside, but it did nothing to clear the storm raging inside me. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. Things would never be the same again. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, but the truth is, I had no idea where I was going. All I knew was that I could not be in that house with her, not right now. The streets were nearly empty, just a few cars passing by under the glow of the streetlights. My mind kept replaying our conversation, her tears, her pleas for forgiveness. But no matter how many times I went over it in my head, I still could not see a way forward. How do you come back from something like this? How do you rebuild trust when it has been shattered so completely? I found myself parked outside the park again, the same place I had gone the night before, right after the party. It seemed fitting in a way to return here. The swing swayed gently in the cold night air, empty and still. The place looked exactly the same as it had the night before, but everything felt different now. I turned off the car and sat there in silence for a long time, just staring out the windshield. My mind was spinning with questions, doubts, anger. How had we gotten here? How had everything fallen apart so quickly? Or had it been falling apart for a long time, and I had just been too blind to see it? I thought about our marriage, the early years when everything seemed perfect. when we were young, in love, and full of hope for the future. I remembered the way Sarah used to look at me, the way we used to laugh together, the way we used to talk for hours about everything and nothing. Back then, it felt like we were unbreakable. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. Life had happened. Kids, work, responsibilities, my health problems. Little by little, we had drifted apart, and I had not even noticed how far apart we had become until it was too late. I thought about what Sarah had said, how she had been feeling lost, disconnected, how she did not recognize herself anymore. I understood that feeling. I had felt it too, but I had never imagined she would turn to someone else for comfort. I had never imagined she would betray me like that. I ran a hand over my face, the exhaustion from the past 24 hours finally catching up to me. I felt like I was at a crossroads, and no matter which direction I chose, there would be no easy answers. Part of me wanted to go back to her, to try to fix things, to hold on to the life we had built together. But another part of me, an angrier, more cynical part, wondered if it was even worth saving. I could not shake the image of her kissing that guy. No matter how hard I tried, it was burned into my mind. The way she had looked at him, the way she had laughed with him, it all felt like a betrayal of everything we had shared. How could I ever trust her again after that? Eventually, I started the car again and headed back to the motel. I was too tired to keep driving around aimlessly, and I knew I needed sleep if I was going to think clearly about all of this. But sleep did not come easily. Even after I collapsed onto the uncomfortable motel bed, my mind kept racing, replaying every moment of the past few days, trying to find some kind of clarity. When I finally did fall asleep, it was fitful and full of dreams I could barely remember. All I knew was that I woke up feeling just as tired as I had the night before, and no closer to an answer. The next day, I decided to do something I had been avoiding for a long time. I called a lawyer. It felt strange, dialing the number and hearing the receptionist's cheerful voice on the other end of the line. I had never thought I would be in this position, calling a divorce lawyer to discuss the possible end of my marriage. But here I was. "I'd like to schedule a consultation," I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "Of course," the receptionist replied, her tone polite and professional. "We can get you in this afternoon if that works for you." "That's fine," I said, feeling the weight of my decision settling in. As I hung up the phone, I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. Divorce. The word felt heavy, final, but deep down, I knew it might be the only way forward. How could I stay in a marriage where the trust had been so thoroughly broken? How could I look at Sarah and not see the betrayal every time? When I arrived at the lawyer's office later that afternoon, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and determination. The office was sleek and modern, with framed diplomas on the walls and leather chairs that looked far more expensive than they probably were. I sat down in one of them, feeling out of place. The lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s, introduced herself as Michelle and offered me a seat in her office. She was calm and professional, her demeanor making it clear that she had handled situations like this countless times before. "So, Mark," she began, looking over some papers in front of her, "tell me what brings you here today." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "I think I want to file for divorce," I said, the words feeling strange as they left my mouth. "But I'm not sure where to start." Michelle nodded, her expression neutral. "I understand. Divorce is a big decision, and it's not something to be taken lightly. Can you tell me a little more about your situation?" I hesitated for a moment, then began to explain everything. The party, the kiss, the conversation I had with Sarah afterward. As I talked, I felt the anger and pain rising up again, but Michelle listened patiently, not interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, her eyes thoughtful. "It sounds like you've been through a lot," she said. "And it also sounds like you've already made up your mind about what you want to do." I nodded slowly. I don't know how to move forward. I can't trust her anymore. I don't think I can ever get past what she did." Michelle looked at me sympathetically. "Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once it's broken, it's very hard to rebuild. It's completely understandable if you feel like divorce is the best option for you." She went on to explain the process, the paperwork, the timeline, the things I would need to consider. It all felt so overwhelming, but at the same time, there was a sense of relief. Finally, I was taking control of the situation. Finally, I was making a decision. When I left her office, I felt strangely calm. The next steps were clear, even if they were painful. I knew now what I needed to do. The life I had built with Sarah was over, and it was time to move on. I walked out of Michelle's office feeling a mix of exhaustion and clarity. The decision had been made, and while it was not easy, it felt right. Divorce was not something I had ever imagined for myself, for us, but life had taken a turn I could not have predicted. I had to accept it. When I got back to the motel, I found myself staring at my phone, debating whether or not to call Sarah. She needed to know what I had decided, but the thought of that conversation made my stomach twist. Part of me wondered if I should just send her a message, something impersonal and to the point. But I owed her more than that. After all the years we had spent together, I owed her a conversation. I took a deep breath and dialed her number. It rang twice before she picked up. "Mark," she said, her voice small and hopeful. "Where are you? Can you come home so we can talk?" I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself. "Sarah, I've thought a lot about everything. About us. About what happened. And I want to see a lawyer today." There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear her heart drop. "A lawyer," she whispered. "Mark, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I don't think we can fix this," I said, my voice calm but firm. "What happened at the party, that wasn't just a mistake, Sarah. That was a breaking point. And I've realized that things between us have been broken for a long time." She was silent for a moment, and I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven. "Please, Mark, don't do this. We can go to therapy. We can work through this. I'll do whatever it takes." I shook my head, even though she could not see me. "I don't think therapy can fix what's broken between us. I can't trust you anymore. And without trust, there's no marriage left. I'm sorry, Sarah, but I've already made up my mind. I'm filing for divorce." Her sobs broke through the phone, and I felt a pang of guilt in my chest. I hated hearing her cry. I hated being the cause of it, but there was no turning back. I had to be honest with her and with myself. "Mark, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "I'll change. I'll do whatever it takes. Don't leave me. Don't end this." "I wish it hadn't come to this," I said softly. "I really do." "But you kissed him. And that kiss, it wasn't just about that moment. It was about everything that's been going wrong between us for the past year, maybe longer. We've grown apart, and we both know it." "I still love you," she whispered through her tears. "I love you too," I admitted, my voice catching. "But love isn't enough. Not anymore." I could hear her crying on the other end, and it tore at me. This wasn't what I had wanted. I had never imagined my life without her, never imagined that this is where we would end up. But the damage had been done, and I knew that staying together would only prolong the inevitable. "I'll come by tomorrow to talk about the details," I said after a long pause. "We'll need to figure out the house, the finances, all of that." She did not respond right away, and for a moment, I wondered if she had hung up. But then I heard her voice again, quieter now, almost a whisper. "I don't want a divorce, Mark. I don't want to lose you." "I'm sorry," I said softly, feeling the weight of those words. "But it's already over." The line went silent for a few moments, and then I heard the click as she hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand, feeling a strange sense of finality wash over me. This was it. The end of a chapter. The end of a life we had built together. There was no turning back now. The next day, I returned to the house, but it no longer felt like my home. Sarah was there, sitting in the living room, her eyes swollen and red from crying. We talked, but it was brief, cold, and to the point. There was no need for more emotional pleas, no need for more arguments. We both knew where things stood. We agreed to sell the house. Neither of us could stay there. It was too full of memories, both good and bad. The process of dividing up our lives, our things, our shared history, it was painful, but it felt necessary. There was no longer an us, and it was time to let go of the life we had built together. The months that followed were some of the hardest of my life. The divorce process dragged on, and each new document, each new meeting with the lawyer, felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. But over time, I started to come to terms with it. I started to see that this was not just the end of something. It was also the beginning of something new. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, a place that felt temporary but necessary. It was quiet, and at first, the silence felt unbearable. But eventually, I learned to live with it. I started focusing on myself again. My health, my work, my friendships. I reconnected with old friends, went back to the gym, and slowly, I began to rebuild my life. Sarah and I barely spoke after the divorce was finalized. There was no animosity between us, just a quiet acknowledgement that we had both moved on. I heard through mutual friends that she had started dating again, and while that stung at first, I knew it was for the best. We both needed to move forward. Looking back, I realized that the kiss at my birthday party was not the true end of our marriage. It was just the spark that ignited what had already been smoldering beneath the surface for a long time. We had grown apart, and neither of us had been brave enough to face it until that night. As painful as it had been, the divorce had given me a chance to start over, to rediscover who I was outside of the marriage. And while I still carried the scars of what had happened, I knew that I was stronger for it. Life does not always turn out the way you expect, but sometimes, the hardest endings are the ones that lead to the most important new beginnings. Bye.